My name is Caitlin Durkin. I'm the manager for the Best Friends Network Relationships. I'm just here to let our amazing panelists give you some good advice. This is building collective momentum, strategies to increase transfers and adoptions. And we're going to be speaking from both the side where you are an organization who needs to transfer animals out, and from the side of an organization who's going to transfer animals in, see how we can work really well together. Let's do the boring stuff first. So housekeeping, I don't want to waste your time. So this is like the most incredible group of people. You have really hard jobs and you decided to take some time to try to figure out how to increase your capacity even further. It's really just an honor to be in front of you, and I want to make sure that we're using your time well. So you're going to have a 1-question survey at the end of this, and we really appreciate you filling that out. You're also very welcome to send us an email with any more feedback that you have. We will make the webinar recording available within 3 business days. It'll probably actually be tomorrow though. So if anybody on your team couldn't make it, we will get it to them. Please submit your questions through the Q&A and then any reactions through the chat. This is because Zoom likes to be a little sneaky and change everything. So 2 ways to interact with us during this webinar. The chat you are already using. That's a great way to respond to anything that our panelists are saying. Throw in your own ideas to share with your peers. The Q&A, which I've put in that red square here, is a way to make sure that I can see your question really easily. If you put it in the chat, I'm probably not going to see it because it's going to scroll right by. If you put in the Q&A, then I will do my best to ask it of our panelists. I may not get to everything, but I will try. And even ones we don't get to, we use to inform future network resources. And then the last thing, we have captions enabled, but if you want to see those, you also have to enable it on your side. So I've put that into the purple box there. Just make sure you click it until it says hide captions. That means your captions are showing, and you'll be able to follow along with that. All right, so we have 2 amazing speakers with us today. First, we have Suzette Cruz, Executive Director for Palm Valley Animal Society, that's in Texas. We also have Jess Bridges, Shelter Operations Manager at Peninsula SPCA, and that is in Virginia. They have worked together on doing transfers. They have worked with many other people on doing transfers. So I'm really excited to hear about the variety of experiences they have in approaching pet caregiving in this way. Before I let them talk though, I'm gonna take your time for 1 minute more and tell you about an upcoming challenge that the Best Friends Network is hosting. In April, we are going to have the Partner Up Challenge. The goal of this challenge is to move animals within the animal welfare system and out of it as well. So we're going to ask organizations to increase transfers as well as to increase adoptions. And we're going to make it worth your while. So for any organization that can pull animals out of participating not yet no-kill shelters, we're going to give you $2,000 for meeting baseline requirements in April. We know that it's hard to take more animals into your care. It's expensive to do that. So we want to give you funds to make that more possible, to help you implement the advice that you're going to hear here today. At this point, we are only recruiting receiving organizations for this challenge. So if you are an organization who's not yet no-kill, who's looking for ways to increase transfers out, we don't want to forget you. Please email us. We'll make sure you're connected with your regional team. Kayla's also going to put into the chat a place where you can put your interest in this kind of thing in the future. So the next time the network does this, we've got your contact information ready to go. So please follow the link, use the QR code. We'd love to see you submitting your interest in this challenge. And then one of us will get back in touch with you next week. All right, I'm going to stop sharing because now we get to just talk to each other. So Jess and Suzette, I love to start by asking, what's something that you're really proud of having done? So something in the transfer and adoption space that went really well and that any of our attendees might be able to try to replicate in their own environment.
Sure. Well, I can go first. One of the things that I'm really proud of here at our shelter is that we focus on enrichment and play groups for our animals. Our shelter, if you're familiar with us, I mean, we can house hundreds of dogs at any given time. So their mental well-being is extremely important to us. And not only does it give them time out of the kennels and get their exercise and playtime with other dogs, but it also helps us to place animals into homes. So one of the key things that we found is that when we're doing enrichment, it allows us to assess behaviors and to provide feedback to rescues, adopters, fosters. And I know that my amazing rescue team, I want to give them kudos because they work really hard with our rescue partners because sometimes they do have some requirements, right? Because they work with fosters or adopters who have who are already waiting for any receiving animal. So they might have questions about behaviors, whether they're dog or child friendly. So we try to accommodate that as much as possible. And another really great thing that I'm really happy that our team does is that they get video. So they record the animals as they're out in play groups and getting enrichment. And we are seeing that that interaction has definitely helped us get more animals into our rescue partners and even adoptions.
Yeah, so I think for me, the things I'm most proud of are, just kind of building a really good relationship with adopters. I know that 10, 20 years ago, it was like, okay, they adopted, great. And that's kind of like where it ended. But now there's this bigger focus on like being a community resource throughout the animal's life. And so I'm really proud of that. I've had that, the pleasure of experiencing that with all the shelters I've worked with, three shelters at this point. And it's been really wonderful to see. So things like providing a pet pantry or providing low-cost vaccinations or, just being there to help troubleshoot when, new behaviors arise, whether it's been 30 days or 3 years. I'm really glad to see sheltering kind of taking that direction because I do think it's a relationship throughout the course of not only that pet's life, but when, they're looking for another pet in the future, I really would like to know that we're their go-to because they know that we've built this great relationship with them.
You both. One of the reasons I wanted to invite you both to be on this panel is because you're really thinking about animal flow, about different options for animals, and really helping them at every stage, as well as their caregivers at every stage. So Suzette, you're talking about like, okay, we're going to help them at playgroup. That's probably lowering their stress a little bit while they're with you, but it also helps adopters or transfer partners see them. And then Jess, you're really following them all the way through as well. And I know you put in the chat that you have used transfers to reunite pets. So, keeping families together and building new families at the same time. So it's really lovely. So let's dig in on the specifics a little more. I'm going to start on if you are a shelter who needs to transfer out pets. You are engaging with your community, you are adopting out, but you have more animals than your community can absorb. What are your best practices for being a good partner to transfer out?
Yeah, so just kind of piggybacking a little off of what Jess said, it's about really establishing a regular and transparent communication with them. So our rescue team, they communicate in all aspects with the potential rescues, whether it's through spreadsheets so that we're all on the same page, whether it's through regular communications. And then of course, we have standard operating procedures and I'm sure they do too. So it's important that we both know like what it is that we're looking for and our standards. And then of course we have protocols for medical evaluations, vaccinations, just any requirements on both ends. And then just ensuring that we're doing what we can on our part by conducting, thorough medical and behavioral assessments before transferring them out, just so that we are ensuring that they're, that the rescue partner is knowing what they're getting at that point, right? Then we work closely with rescue groups to identify like at-risk animals, coordinate transfers with them. So just, making sure that we have solid relationships, that's our goal. Our goal is to get the animals out of the shelter. And so, we work with over 89 rescue groups at this time. And so we're really proud of the relationships that we've established.
That's enormous. How do you manage 89 relationships at once? Like do volunteers take any of it? Is it all staff doing it?
Right now it's all staff. And so my current rescue manager, she's great. She's been with the organization for a really long time. And of course, you know, we have ones that are like more active, right? So that's a more smaller group that we work with constantly, but that is our network right now. We are able to, and some of them are breed specific rescues as well, or they're different, you know, they're very specific, so they can't take in all animals, but our goal is to ensure that every animal that comes in, if it's able to be networked to rescue, and if it is a very specific need, then that's what we're working with.
Amazing. And you've got one of your 89 partners giving you a shout out here.
Yeah.
So that's incredible. So thanks, Laura. I'm gonna keep on this topic, and Jess, I know you're working at a shelter that is more on the receiving end, but you've worked at other places before, so it's open to both of you. So how do you prioritize what animal is going to go to which group if you've got multiple partners like you do, Suzette?
For me, I always liked to use like a first come, first serve system, because to me, the best thing we can do is to try to move those animals out of a shelter in general, number one. But I actually had a Google Doc that I kept, or Google Sheet. And it was, we had a brilliant IT person at HRA, my last shelter that I was coordinating transfers out. And he found some way to hook it up to Pet Point and make it so every day, 3 times a day, that sheet, that Google Sheet, uploaded with the current animals who were available for transfer at the DC shelter. And so that made things really easy, because before I was doing it by hand. But that Google Sheet was then shared with every partner that I had. I'd ask them, do you want to be added onto this Google Sheet? And they'd be like, great. And I'm like, cool, it updates at 8, 12, and 4 every day. And then they would all regularly check it. And they'd email me or text me and be like, this one. And then if I had newer partners, if I had partners who, you know, maybe weren't as active on the Google Sheet, whenever they wanted to see what we had, I'd send them that link and be like, here's what you can choose from. Feel free, because anybody on that list is, you know, it would be great to get them out. And then I could highlight too, you know, because it would have like a picture of them and their basic medical stuff. But I could then highlight, you know, hey, make sure you pay specific attention to Brandy, because, you know, she's been with us for a little while. And I think that she'd be really great for your area, because she'll do great in like a more rural community where she has some space to run, that kind of stuff. So that was key, because having to do that by hand, or like trying to just mix and match to each different place all the time, can be a little exhausting.
Okay. Do you do something similar, Suzette?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, they, again, like as soon as the animal comes into our shelter, we're networking them, right? And so, and again, they all have access to spreadsheets, you know, just like Jess said, we try to make it just as transparent as possible, because we don't obviously, we don't want to keep them here. We want them to have the first live outcome. So whatever that is, if that's rescue, then that's what we work with. And then of course, in terms of like prioritizing, right, we obviously want our most vulnerable to get out first, right? Whether it's the puppies, the kittens, the neonates, the length of stays, medical cases, or animals that are about to be length of stay, you know, which for us here, you know, in the Rio Grande Valley, it's usually like our large brown black dogs, unfortunately, that are usually the ones that stay with us the longest. So we try to focus on just getting them out. First live outcome is our top priority, whether it's through ground transport, and we also do flights with Dog is my co-pilot, and we work with them as well to try to get them out.
That's a lot of information. And Bianca is asking in the chat, like shared sheet, all partners saw what others tagged. Is that accurate, Jess? That it was like a bunch of rescue partners in one Google Sheet?
So they all had access to the same Google Sheet. They didn't get to tag it. Because once we use Pet Point at HRA. And so once someone had tagged the animal, I moved them to a special status. Like I was like, you know, rescue pending, and they would get removed off of that spreadsheet on the next upload, whether it was at, you know, noon or 4 p.m., whatever. So it was only, you know, animals that were listed as like available in Pet Point that were on that spreadsheet. So they kind of naturally fell off. That way we also didn't have like a bunch of people like, why are you giving a Yorkie to this group? We want, and I'm like, nope, we're not going to do that, because it's not about what kind of dog it is, what breed it is, whatever. It's about, like Suzette said, finding them the first best live outcome.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry for the nitty-gritty questions, but transfers are like the most logistically complicated things. So I know you all are doing it all the time and it feels natural, but I just want to dig in a little bit there. So I know you all are prioritizing that live outcome for that pet. But Suzette, you mentioned like some pets are going to be a higher priority for transfer versus others. In your experience, is it better to have that be a kind of like ad hoc decision that a volunteer or staff member is making, assessing that animal's needs? Or do you have something more standardized, like a formula that you'd recommend using for that choice?
So I mean, again, we just kind of go back as soon as the animal comes in, right? They're automatically assessed, right, through our intake team. And then our rescue, team is right in it with them, right? So as soon as they come like off the animal, the ACO trucks, right, they're being assessed. And then our rescue team just hops right in and starts networking them right away. So I mean, yeah, they go into our website, but then, if we see an animal that might potentially have an injury that we're not able to treat right away, or because we don't have a veterinarian at the moment, then they go ahead and put them out to rescue. It just really depends. We definitely try to utilize our fosters to try to help us with those as well. But yeah, medical cases, some, especially during kitten season, I know everybody can relate. Like, our foster team can't care for all of these, neonates and all these kittens. So we try to prioritize the need according to what we're able to do here at the shelter.
Great. Yeah, being really adaptive. Anything to add, Jess?
No, I mean, I think it's the one thing I've always loved about transports is that it's quite literally something different every day. Like I've walked into work before and my boss would look at me and go, "You're gonna have to find rescue for 3 alligators now." And it's like, okay. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it is kind of a moment by moment thing. It's we had a really great system in DC, again, because it's just the volume of animals we were getting into the DC city shelter. We had a really great system where I had like a monday.com board, and everybody who, like the heads of all the different departments, like medical or behavior or whatever, they could all flag an animal for me. That way, if there was one that maybe I didn't hear about through the grapevine or see myself, they could flag it, they could flag the reason why, and then I could start looking out from there. So like we had a dog with a heart condition, or whatever, like medical could flag that for me, and then I have that kind of running list, and then I could update it to be like rescue secured, or reaching out or whatever. So yeah, a lot of it was the general overall emphasis was getting animals out for live outcomes at all the time, but then we would look at those case by case ones kind of as they came.
Let's start looking from the other side of things. So I know you both have either worked at or worked with organizations who are able to receive animals, that they have a little bit more capacity than that source shelter, and they can help you secure that live outcome for that pet. If you are a receiving organization, what would you recommend that they do as they approach their transfer partners to make this process as smooth as possible?
I mean, I think from my point of view, I think it helps having really started out in transferring out when I started transferring in, because I know the plight of the rescue coordinator. And so I try to be the partner that I wish I had, and that goes both ways. And so for me, it's about, what can I do to help that's in our capacity to help? And then, how do we get on the same page? Like, I love when I get a new partner and they're like, here is our procedure for what we do on intake. We deworm, we do these vaccines, whatever. Do you require anything else on top of this? Because then we can make sure that gets done. And I can be like, well, here's what we require, whatever. And then kind of turn that conversation into, okay, well then what is something that you struggle with? Do you have a hard time getting animals fixed? Great. Well, we don't. So we have, we can do that, no problem. So I think for me, it's a lot of, I want to approach it by helping however I can in a way that, the shelter I'm at can help. And kind of keeping that in mind, because I know what it's like to be on the other end of that computer.
Are there any kind of barriers that your organization or an organization you used to work for has had? Like, we're not going to accept animals who have this medical need because we can't meet it. How do you evaluate what barriers you are going to put in place, what you might be able to remove, and then how do you communicate that well?
Yeah, I think that, well, it's a fluid thing, right? Because a lot of it's dependent on, so like, for example, most of the organizations I've worked for have never really been able to take in an animal that has diabetes. mostly because, you know, none of them really had the medical staffing available that would be able to manage that. And it can be difficult and very, you know, very tricky to manage in a shelter. And so we weren't actively taking in animals that had diabetes. That could change one day. I hope it does. I love that idea. But I think that was a conversation I usually would have pretty frequently with our medical team. Same thing with our behavior team. You know, where are we at now? Do we have a ton of dogs who don't like other dogs? Well, then we probably need to find homes for a few of them before we bring any dogs who don't like other dogs, right? So it was fairly fluid. But I think that the biggest thing is trying to figure out like what your shelter's like niche is, right? So when I was in DC, it turns out that DC does not care about FIV or FELV. For some reason, the citizens of DC they're not bothered by it. They get it, they understand it. We had cats who would fly out of the shelter at the same rate as cats who didn't have FIV or FELV. And I was like, oh my God, how does no one know this? Because down here in Southern Virginia, like this is a big deal. And it's a life-altering deal for a lot of these cats. And so who would have known, right? So now I tell everybody, I'm like, call DC. They have no problem. But I think that stuff like that, when you figure out what your shelter's niche is and what you guys do really well, that's what you want to capitalize on and be like, okay, we are, you know, a previous shelter I worked for had a really amazing eyeball protocol. They could save eyeballs that looked like they were not savable. So, you know, that's like one of those things where like you don't really think about it. I think learning what your niche is and then, you know, telling people, just tell them, be like, hey, if you ever get a weird eyeball case, call us.
Amazing. Suzette, with your 89, you've obviously been able to steward some excellent relationships. Has there ever been anything that one of your partners has done that you've been like, wow, you just made my life so much easier, and I want to make this easy for you as well? Anything that kind of like stood out?
Yeah. So I think it's always really helpful when rescue partners are willing to meet us halfway, especially when it comes to the cost portion of it, right? So, you know, as an organization that sends animals out, right, it's a huge investment on our part, right? And of course, we're more than willing to do that. But, you know, we vet them completely, including spay and neuter. And then, you know, we have a couple of members of actually one of them is a volunteer, a longtime volunteer that will actually do ground transports for us, but we can only go so far, right? I think we're South Texas, so we're near the Mexican border for those who don't know where we are. As far as we go is like Austin, which is about a 6 to 7 hour drive. So, you know, if they can meet us halfway with that, that's super helpful. Some of them, you know, if we don't have a vet currently and they need a spay and neuter, you know, it's always helpful when they say, hey, you know, we'll pay for it. Like we'll help cover the costs just to get it done. So I think meeting in the middle is the most helpful. And we do have some rescue partners that will do that for us, you know, because we're on limited funds. We help, you know, thousands of animals a year. And so anytime when they're willing to do that, we're really excited to work with them.
That's great. Meeting in the middle, physically and metaphorically.
Exactly.
That's a really good tagline, I think, for this webinar. Great. So I was trying to do like beginning to end, but Dana has a great question for us here about something that might happen in the middle. So is there value in having an intermediary organization who can provide short-term foster to assess, vet, transfer? Is that something that you found to be helpful in your experience?
I haven't worked with a ton. I know of a couple organizations like this. Their whole point is that they kind of like to do the vetting and the fostering, and then they like to send them, you know, for us further north here in Virginia. But I think it really depends, right? So for me, the biggest thing is it's hard to, you know, if we're going to commit to an animal, to take in an animal, and there's an intermediary who's going to do all this stuff, we still need to make sure that behaviorally, you know, or medically it's lining up. So if they take it to get vetted and they discover that they're diabetic or they have like a condition we're not able to manage, then, you know, that's where it gets sticky, because we can't take in something that we know we can't care for and house appropriately. We are, you know, we're ethically bound not to take in animals we know we can't care for. And so at the same time, we never want to put it back on an intermediary who's now somehow stuck with that animal. So I think it really depends. I think you have to have a really, really good relationship. I think there has to be a really good understanding across all the organizations involved about what's going to happen if something is discovered during the process that makes that animal ineligible to go to that eventual rescue or shelter. I think that once you have all that hammered out, it can be really helpful, because who doesn't love a fully vetted animal showing up to their shelter? I mean, that's the dream. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of having as much on paper and like having really clear SOPs and a really great relationship with those two groups.
So we've got Rachel and one other talking about starting that relationship with a rescue or a no-kill shelter that can receive some animals from you. How do you do your due diligence? How do you make sure that they are a reputable organization to work with? And how do you make sure that they're going to be good partners for you moving forward?
Yeah, so for sure, we have a very thorough vetting process. I know my rescue manager, she has a way of doing things. Obviously, one is to ensure that they are a 501c3. They also do their due diligence by looking at their socials, by looking at their website, and seeing like how do they market the animals that they receive? Do they post updates? How transparent are they about the current situations? If they are rescues that are receiving funding, like people will, give money so that they can get their treatment or whatever the case is, like, are they following through with those type of things? And then of course we get references as well. So, we'll ask them questions, whether they have vet references or other partners that they've worked with, if they can provide us those references, and they give them a calls, they try to vet them as much as possible. So, because obviously we want to make sure that our animals are going into the right hands, of course. And so it's very thorough. And a lot of the times either they contact us and say that they're interested in getting animals from us, or, we're doing our part as well by looking, just going on socials and looking at other rescues and seeing if they want to be partners with us. But I think it's extremely important that there is a vetting process and that it's being followed. And that way you can feel more comfortable with, where you're sending your animals.
On the other side, so we have a question. Oh, I lost it, so I don't know who asked, but someone was asking, I'm a rescue. I'm trying to find more organizations that I can help, that I can pull from. How do I find that information?
Yeah, usually for my team, it's just a Google search for them, right? Because there's so many options. There's so many people that are doing them, and you'd be surprised how many are actually in your backyard. I know for us, we have a lot of smaller rescues, and so we just kind of go on socials and we just kind of see, or we can ask other rescue partners that we do work with, like if they know of anybody that's near our area or close to our area that might benefit by receiving animals from us. So I think it's a lot of networking too that needs to be done on your end, just to kind of grow your network and kind of figure out who you can work with in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I second that. Google searches are everyone's best friend. I also highly recommend, obviously there's Facebook, so we all know it. But Best Friends Network has a Facebook group, which I have used before for both looking for animals and trying to get one out, or a few out, really. I think American Pets, or the American Pets Alive or Haas Facebook page is the same. That's used a lot for transfers. I know Virginia Federation of Humane Societies, if you're in Virginia, there's a group called High Five VA on Facebook groups that is for Virginian animals that need to find placement in Virginia, and some out-of-staters, like, the DMV area, up to like Delaware and Pennsylvania, they'll actually join so they can help out. So yeah, I think the Facebook groups are also super helpful, as long as they're like the legitimate, Haas or Best Friends, or it really helps, because that also kind of gives it some credibility there too. Like if I'm in the Best Friends group, I know that everybody who's in there is an animal friend. So that's a really nice way to kind of have some of the vetting done for you.
So I'll pitch two more Best Friends resources for you. So Roseanne, we recently put out an update of the Pet Lifesaving dashboard, and that will show you organizations across the country by how many pets they have saved, and how much more help they need in order to achieve no kill. So looking there and seeing if there are any organizations near you who you don't have a connection with yet, who look, at least by the numbers, like they need help, are worth reaching out to. they might not be a good fit. It might not be that every organization who has not yet achieved no kill is in need of transfer. There might be other things they need, but that's a really great place to start. The second, I would say, Facebook group, the Best Friends Network Facebook group is great. If you're not there already, please request to join and we will get you added. That is limited to network partners. And so that means that these are organizations who are 501c3s or government organizations who are serving cats and or dogs in the 50 states plus the District of Columbia. I would still though recommend using Suzette's advice on vetting, because just because they're going to be, you know, really good for some things doesn't mean they're going to be good for you. You still want to keep your own process in place for that. And we had some folks in the chat saying like, I need help. So that's great. You know, the more you can come to this peer-to-peer networking, the more you can get in touch with that. Okay, let's see. Let's go to some specifics. So some harder populations. So Bianca is asking about heartworm positive dogs. How are you marketing them to get to rescue? How are you dealing with the expense for that? That's a challenging case.
I think for me, I have found a lot of success with heartworm positive dogs, specifically with groups that have possibly more restrictions on the animals they can take. So two of the biggest groups I've worked with, two of my absolute favorite groups to work with as well, are unable to take large, like super large breed dogs and like pit bull type dogs, right? Which, I mean, let's be real, like you look in your shelter anywhere and there's a ton of pitties. So that kind of sounds like, okay, so what am I supposed to say? But on the flip side, those are the ones that were like, but I can take seniors. I can take animals who need dentals. I can take animals who have medical needs. I can take, you know, bottle babies. Like those are always the ones that are like, I can't take these things, but I can help with this stuff. And I found a lot of success with those groups in particular because they know there's a massive chunk of animals they're not able to help with, and they want to find a way to offset that. So I would say don't ever write off any group, even if they can't take, you know, a big part of the population you may have in your shelter, because a lot of them know what that looks like, and they know how that can make you feel when you read that email. You're like, yeah, we can take some dogs, but we can't take pitties. They know kind of how crushing that is, and they definitely want to offset that. So I would say look at those places.
This is my cat, Siobhan, who is from a transfer before I adopted her. So good time to break and just say thank you all in working in this space for giving me this amazing cat who also wants the webinar to be over. So I'm going to try to prevent her from accidentally turning us off. Let's broaden out a little bit. So Shirley is prompting us to think about the community. So how do we get community support around transfers, whether you're an organization who is sending or receiving?
Yeah, so for us, what really works is to basically get on social media, right? And just kind of share compelling stories, testimonials from adopters, foster families, and rescue partners, and kind of highlight the positive impacts of transferring animals can be, especially in our area. You know, we have a very high stray population. And so there's, you know, the animals in our community are basically kind of like outweigh the amount of humans that can care for them, and including the shelters and rescues. And so just kind of highlighting that, using newsletters, even events, and just trying to build that audience and letting them know that, and everybody loves a feel-good story, you know, and so we kind of, once we share, you know, for example, when we do our flights, when our flight season happens, it's always such a nice moment to be a part of. And so, you know, we share that. And then we also do is we will post like follow-up stories, right? So that they can see, you know, oh, this animal came from the Rio Grande Valley and now it's living its best life in Montana, you know, just kind of showing like the positive repercussions from getting them out and getting them into these other rescues.
It's amazing. I love the follow-up stories, right? Like you are transferring this animal out, but that doesn't mean you're not caring about them anymore, that you're really investing in them and you still want to know how they end up. It's beautiful. Jess, maybe from the side of an organization who is receiving in animals, how do you manage community relationships? How do you explain the importance of transfer to them?
Yeah. So the biggest thing for me personally, at least, is that we are not going to ever do the like, oh, these animals came from a really underfunded, overcrowded kill shop. Like, we're not going to do that because we're not going to disparage our partners. We're partners for a reason. We've all been there at some point, either in our careers or in our shelter's history. So we are all in this together. And that's the message that I've always tried to take with the community as well. And I've been lucky enough to work with organizations who have all taken that stance as well. So when we're on social media, we're talking about how, yes, there's overcrowding. Yes, this is from a partner who was running out of space, but we're going to talk about that because it's important to talk about the fact that we're still facing overpopulation crisis for animals in America, and we need better spay neuter laws. But we're gonna talk about it. We can be transparent and still highlight the fact that this is a partnership where we are working together. Whenever I've been with a receiving organization, it's very much we are lucky enough to be able to do this work where we can help these animals and these people who need help. And so we focus in on that, about how it's that partnership and how we are thankful, and that the community support allows us to do that work.
That's great. Thank you. I just want to underline what you said about like being transparent about a need without demonizing anyone. Organizations who need help are not bad organizations. They just need help, right? And so I love that we're all in this together. Let's see. How are you using volunteers to support your outcomes? Whether that's part of transfers or before, after, like, how do you see them fitting into this equation?
Yeah, well, for us, I mean, our volunteers are so important, right? But we just try to educate them about the transfer process and its benefits, and just how it aligns with our organization's mission. Like, what is our goal, right? Our goal is to find live outcomes. That's our number one priority. And so, again, sharing with them the stories, highlighting positive outcomes, and then also inviting them into the transfer process. Like, if we know we're going to have a large transport that's going to require help, we invite them to be a part of that so that they can see it and they can feel good about what they're doing. And so I think we get a lot of support from volunteers. It's a mix of volunteers and staff that like do some of these larger rescue trips, or when they actually are going on the flights to go, out of the state. But I think inviting them into it and explaining to them what the benefits are, I think it kind of builds that camaraderie between not only our community, but also getting more volunteers to come into our shelter.
That's great. Digging in really specifically, have you had volunteers transport in personal vehicles, or are they always using shelter managed vehicles? If they use personal, do you reimburse for mileage? How do you make that work?
Sure. So we actually have, we don't ask them to transport in their personal vehicles. We do have a van that we have here at the shelter. And we do have one long-term volunteer who will do the transports for us. And so, and she's a big advocate for us as well. So if she's, out there in the community, she's talking about how she's helping Palm Valley, just by, even if it's just driving, is such an important role for us, because it's not always easy to have a staff member do it, or, a rescue is maybe not able to meet us halfway for whatever reason, but we really want to get the animal to this receiving organization. We do have volunteers that will actually get in our vans, and we'll feed them, we'll do whatever we need to do, we'll ensure them all of the good things, but we have really great support here.
That's great.
Yeah, I'll echo what Suzette said. I've had kind of both. We've had volunteers. I've been really lucky to always have a shelter vehicle available at all of my organizations. So we always said, basically, yes, like, please use the shelter vehicle for transports for volunteers. If they wanted to take their own personal car, we didn't have a problem with that, provided like it hit all like their, the minimum. So making sure it has AC if it's hot outside, that kind of stuff. But they were welcome to do so, but we didn't reimburse mileage. And that's kind of like a personal preference thing because we had that vehicle available to them. I know somebody just asked about like liability. Everybody had to do the same thing, whether they were an employee or a volunteer, as far as getting cleared to drive. So that was a big, they were added to our insurance basically. That really helps when you have consistent drivers who like, maybe like a team or like Suzette has like a one like long-term volunteer who loves to make those drives. So that made that much easier because it was all covered the same way. But yes, I personally like any way that a volunteer wants to help in the transport process, I am always happy to have that. I had one volunteer who her favorite thing to do was to prep the kennels for the van before a transport. And I'm like, yes, please. I love that. I can always use help with that. So yes.
Great. I'm going to ask one more transfers question, and then we're going to move on to adoptions and managing, multiple outcome pathways at the same time. So we've got a couple of folks asking about community pushback on out-of-state transfers. So, we've seen a lot of people worried about that. I saw Jess make a little face. So how do you make sure that your community is feeling good about transfers that you're doing, whether those are within your own state or across state lines?
I think with us, it's just being transparent with the community because ultimately that's what they want, right? They want to know that whatever it is that, especially our donors, right, that they're donating to us, they're giving to us, that we're doing our due diligence and we're doing right by the animals. And so that goes back to the vetting, just reassuring them like we are working with the best of the best, we're working with, very vetted organizations. We'll even on our socials, we'll share posts from those receiving organizations. And then, we collaborate that way so that people can see that. So they'll tag each other. They'll also do success stories and say, oh, you know what, we got so-and-so from Palm Valley Animal Society, and so that they can see that this is a good working relationship. And then of course, putting up those success stories, right. And showing that, look, they're doing well, we made the right choice. We're doing our due diligence. And so we need your support to continue to allow us the animals to go out of state. Yeah.
I love that reposting another organization's social media posts because it's like so little work for you all, but like really engaging for your community. Jess, how about from the side of an organization who's doing transfers in from another state or maybe even farther away from within a large state?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is, and I think this is something that's a little bit newer because we had a really great time during COVID. Obviously, adoptions were very high, transfers were happening all over the country. But now we're kind of seeing what happens after, right? So this has been a topic that's been a little bit more fleshed out recently. My personal professional opinion would be if there are animals in your community that need help, that should be first priority. If there is some reason that you're unable to help them, then you should look to the, it's like the ASV guidelines say that, animals should go the shortest distance in order to find a live outcome as possible, right? And sometimes that shortest distance is Florida to Maine. So definitely encourage that. I also encourage people to look, when you help your community, when that group that you're helping gets to a better place, they can then help others. Now you have two organizations who are helping others, and that's going to grow. So I do think that there is a little bit of, looking kind of and evaluating programs constantly. I think that's something we should all be doing all the time. But especially if you're hearing from your community that they are frustrated that, some of these animals are coming in from out of state, there may be totally valid reasons why you're not pulling from community organizations, or maybe you're not able to, maybe they're not working with you. There's like a million reasons why. But if it's possible and you know that your community is looking for it, you should look into it because, again, that's just kind of helping when your community gets into a good place, now your community is helping another community, and it's just the impact there. I would also say that while, a lot of us probably have somewhere in our mission statement that we're here for the animals on our community, that community is not just our like regional community, it's the community of animals throughout the state, throughout the country. None of us got into this work because we just can't stand animals. And so the reality is, like, sometimes there's going to be out-of-state animals coming in. Sometimes that's going to be the thing that makes the most sense. Sometimes it's special cases, whatever. I think the big thing is that it's a life saved. These were lives that are saved. These are live outcomes. These are people at that rescue out of state or that shelter out of state that we are helping. It's not just like this transaction where like the animals arrive in a van and like they're just, there's a whole line of animals and people that this helps. It helps not only the animals who show up in that van in the new state for rescue, it helps the animals who are waiting in the queue for spay and neuter. It helps the caretakers who are, you know, caring for about 50 animals per person per day because they're so overcrowded. Like, so it's not just, oh, we're just bringing in kittens from out of state. It's a long line of helping people, and we're all humans and we all love animals. So if it helps somebody and it helps an animal, ultimately it's a good thing.
I love that. And it's a big one. We got a couple questions about it. So I'm just going to like re-emphasize a few things you said. One was really being transparent with your community about what you're already doing to help your community. Another is really making sure that you are helping your community when and how you can. So that might get complicated. You know, working with people is weird. Right? So it's maybe, you know, right now is not going to be the best time to help the closest shelter to you. But maybe you build up credibility by working with somebody a little bit further on. And then the last one was like helping your community see the big picture. So I really appreciate you, Jess, laying that all out at the different levels. Okay, so I've made you talk about transfers from OPUS to Bauer. So let's talk a little bit about adoptions as well. So Tommy is talking about getting adoptions for dogs. And I'm going to throw in for large dogs. We know that we've all been worrying about large dogs for a while now. So is there anything special or particularly successful that you've done to promote large dogs in general, for adoption, whether it's transferred first or adoption right away?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to doing the play groups and the enrichment, because I think that's highlighting the animal, highlighting when they're, you know, not in a kennel, right? When they're in the kennels, they're obviously they might be stressed, those kind of things, but taking them out, letting them play, letting them run, letting them interact with other people, inviting volunteers to come, inviting community to come, like, hey, come and watch our play groups, come in, see how our animals are doing here. Highlighting them is going to be key. And I know, like ourselves, like we struggle with it too. I mean, we call them the Texas brown dogs because they just stay with us for so long. They are usually on our length of stays. But we are trying to get more creative with highlighting them more and focusing on them more. And then I know Jess had made a point earlier about like trying to get the rescues to take other different animals. And I think that's what we do too. So in our rescue department, if, you know, we have a rescue group that wants specific animals, and we're trying to get that together, we'll say, well, hey, you know what, we'll work with you really well, we'll do what you need, but can you take a couple of these dogs, right? And these are like our length of stay or our large dogs that have been here a while, and we want a live outcome for them. So we just try to find different ways and try to get creative to do that. We also promote like our foster program a lot with Tales Around Town, pajama parties. And this is like the Tales Around Town, like they're able to take the dog out, even if it's just for a couple of hours. A foster can come, take them to go get a pup cup, you know, whatever, take them around, and encourage them to give us photos, videos that we can put onto the website to highlight them. And then of course we have like pajama parties, which gets them out of the shelter for a couple of nights. And then once if the foster doesn't decide to adopt, well, now we have some really good notes on the dog. You know, yes, this dog's a larger dog, but it's very sweet. It's very calm. It's more of a lap dog. Like we have all of these notes and all of these behavioral comments that we can try to push out the animals more so that they're more looked at and not overlooked.
That's amazing. Thank you. Jess, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I echo everything Suzette said, obviously. I think typically I've seen mostly one of two things when I see people who are not looking at a large dog or who've said they don't want to take a large animal home. And it's one, it's a housing situation, or two, they're afraid they're not going to be able to manage that large dog. You know, that dog's going to be wild and terrible on a leash, whatever. So for the second, obviously, things like enrichment, getting their energy out, helping to work on training them, you know, making sure they're comfortable on a leash. That's all great, because then you can be like, that's not going to be a problem. Let me show you how he does on a leash. He's an angel. So anytime you can kind of share that with the adopter, it helps put their mind at ease. And to be fair, when that animal is, you know, literally just going to drag somebody like they're on a sleigh, you know, it's not the right fit, right? So the other part is, you know, obviously the housing stuff. People have breed limits, weight limits on their apartments, whatever. That's really at kind of a different level than what we're doing in the shelter. But I will share that DC recently passed a law that they done this right before I left DC. And so DC no longer allows breed or weight restrictions for a renter. Like, so landlords and rental companies no longer can discriminate on someone's living eligibility based on the breed or the size of their dog. They have capped pet rent at a certain amount, and they have made all pet deposits capped, I think, at like $300 max, and they have to be refundable. And that has made the biggest difference already, and that only passed just a few months ago. That has been incredible. I think we will see more states, especially because, like, you know, Maryland and Virginia, up in that area, they're all kind of competing for the commuters to come live there. I think that we're going to see a lot more states starting to pass things like that. I highly recommend you write to your congressman, to your senators, make relationships with them at the shelter level, because that is going to be what really keeps some of these large animals in homes and finds the big ones.
I love that. It's so exciting. I really hope that more states and areas start doing something like that. This might be a great way to get volunteers engaged too. So advocacy on your behalf can be an amazing thing for your community members to do to support you. And so giving them this information, sharing it with their elected officials might be a great way to get people involved, even if they're not able to be like physically at your shelter. Last question, I think. So we've talked about how logistically complicated transfers are, but transfers don't exist on their own. Like, you have this animal in your organization and you want to find them the right placement. How do you manage, you know, finding foster placement or rescue placement or adoption placement for an animal? How do you keep everyone on the same page while also being transparent with the public?
Yeah, I know, like with our shelter, all of our departments work extremely well together because we all have the same goal, right? And I think having like obviously standard operating procedures, checklists, things like that, that kind of keep us all on the same page. But in terms of like I said, mentioned earlier, like as soon as we receive an animal, like it's already getting networked immediately. Like we're not harboring that information. As soon as they come off, they're getting, you know, put into shelter love. So that information is already immediately accessible. And then of course, our rescue team will see that the animals have come in, and then they'll have all that information. And then they just start letting the rescues know, especially like if we get a lot of like German Shepherds or a lot of like large breeds, Huskies, those kind of things. We'll work with those breed specific rescues and let them know like, hey, we got in this specific, you know, breed, you know, are you interested? Like, so it's like from like day one, right? Where, you know, if they have no stray hold, we're just trying to get them out. So I think it's just doing your best to like get them out, and all aspects of the team know. And again, shelter love is what we use here at our shelter. So it's very, I know they kind of underwent some changes, so we're still kind of getting used to all of that, but it's very easy to use. It has all the information that we need. It all has all the reports built in so that we can pull up any information on the animals. But it's just knowing that our team works well together. We also meet weekly. Okay, we meet weekly together as a team. We talk, we have something we call population management, and that we work through these animals. Okay, this particular animal has been here like 30 days, 60 days. Okay, what are we doing? What are we working on? How many times have we networked? How many times have they been pled out to rescue, foster? Did we have any adoption interest? Did we follow up adopt? And we kind of do like, I know there's so many moving parts and it does get very tricky, but let me say it's possible. It's extremely difficult. And I mean, I'm telling you, our shelter intakes, last year we intake almost 7,000 animals. So it's a lot of networking we're having to doing on our part, but it is extremely possible.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It can be a lot to manage. The whole process can be a lot to manage. My firm belief as a, I guess, middle-aged millennial is that automate everything you can. Automate it. So you don't have to think about it, set it and forget it. And so, for example, I used Monday.com a lot when I was in DC, and I could write automations that would, so when I put an animal in as going to rescue on the health board that we had for transports, then it automatically notified all the USDA accredited vets that there was an animal that needed a health certificate and it needed it by this date. And I'd list anything else extra, like they need a combo test, whatever they needed, right? They need blood work. And so it gives them that end date, that whatever, and it just automatically sent them an email with like a little summary, and then that was it. All I had to do was just put that information in, and then from there, and then they would go back, they would mark it as completed. And then I would get an email from Monday.com being like, hey, so-and-so completed your task. Great. I didn't have to worry about it. All I had to do was, I usually set up like a reminder email of like 24 hours later, I'd get a notification being like, hey, this hasn't been done, or 24 hours before the due date, this hasn't been done yet. So I could then follow up and be like, hey, are we doing this tomorrow? It's okay if we are, but just trying to make sure we're keeping track. But like I said, that's Monday.com. Asana does a lot of the same stuff, but like basically it's your basic, like, sort of group management systems. I swear by those. Use them to their full capacity, because whatever you can make a computer do for you is more space in your brain for the things that only you can do.
That is great. I completely agree. I'm also going to make a pitch for volunteers here. If this is not your thing, then I bet there's a project management nerd in your community who would love to come in and set some stuff up for you. So tools like Monday, Asana, Trello, Google Sheets, you've got somebody, and maybe that's a volunteer role that you can put out and take a little bit of work off of your plate. I don't know about you all, but Jess and Suzette have been so amazing that I'm like a little bit overwhelmed by how many good ideas we talked about here. So I'm going to take a piece from one of the panels at the Best Friends Conference last week of like, what's your one thing, right? You're not going to change everything tomorrow, but like maybe what's one thing that you can start doing to make your transfer process go better or make your adoptions go better. I'm also going to, again, pitch that you try to do this on Best Friends' dime. So if you are a receiving organization and you want to get involved, help one of our participating transferring out organizations, we would love to give you a little bit of money to try these things. It is hard to make changes, and so if you can have a little bit of incentive on it, we would love to do that for you. So with deep gratitude to Jess, Suzette, everyone who's been here. We'll end here. We're going to put up that one question survey right now. We'd appreciate it if you could fill it out. But other than that, thank you all so much. Have an excellent rest of your day, and hi to your pets for me.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.